You are listening to the Let's Chat Soon podcast. We are so excited that you are embarking on this journey with us. Let's Chat Soon is a space where we chat all things body, soul, and spirit, and how when you align all three, you unlock a full life. A healthy you is the best gift that you can give to grow the kingdom and to those you love.
Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Chat Soon podcast. I'm your host, Alexis.
And I'm Mackenzie.
What are we chatting about today?
Today, we looked at the viewers or the rankings of our episodes, and we found out that you guys like a little something about relationships. Mm-hmm. So we said, skirt, we're changing what we're talking about. Skirt.
Put it in reverse.
Go a different direction. We are not talking about what we initially planned. We are instead talking about relationships again.
Yeah. And
more specifically, I've done this episode before, but I was in a totally different relationship, and he clearly did not listen to the episode that I put out. So
he didn't get the clue.
He did not get that memo. But fortunately, my very sweet boyfriend did. Now, today we're talking about how to know if you're ready for a relationship.
What if Brendan went back and listened to that episode and was taking notes? He's like, wait, she said what?
I'm cracking up. Actually, it's all just a game. And he's like, tee, I
he's
tricked
just playing the
you.
cards, right? I love it.
I mean, honestly, boys, if you're listening, well, I guess listen to this episode.
Yeah.
Because the other one
notes.
disappeared from the internet.
Get your pens out, your pencils, your notebooks. Class is in session. Oh.
Class is in session. But in all seriousness, we are really excited about this episode. I feel like I needed this episode years ago, especially when I got out of my super long-term relationship. For those of you who do not know, I was in a 5-year-long relationship, got out of it, thought I was ready for a relationship the next day. Nobody is.
No. I've been there and done that. I've talked about it previously, but I was fully engaged with a planned wedding dress, the whole shebang. And yeah, I thought I could move on the next day, and that simply was not the case.
It feels like there's all this pressure in your 20s too to have it figured out immediately, which we've touched on that before. But I feel like especially when you get out of a relationship and you are in your younger mid-20s, really any point in life, it feels like you need to just rush to the next. Mm-hmm. I had people when I got out of my 5-year-long relationship tell me, oh wait, it's fine. You're going to meet someone tomorrow. I knew this girl who got out of a long-term relationship, met her now husband 10 days later, and now they're married and happy with kids. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's going to be me. No.
I had a therapist tell me that. So the only time I've ever gone to therapy, which I probably should start going again, was after my broken engagement. And I go see this therapist. I tell him what I'm going through. I tell him all the stories. And his piece of advice was to go on a date and start dating again, immediately, because that's how you're going to get over it, is find the right one. That's how you're going to get over the broken engagement. And I said, sir, are we being real right now? Are you being serious?
That's genuinely the worst advice and most damaging advice I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Because in the standpoint of oh, you have to go find the one. I'm under the personal belief you don't have a one to find.
No. And I was not the one for that person anyways. For my future boyfriend, I was not anywhere near being ready to reciprocate whatever he was going to give me at all. Even if he was the perfect guy, I wasn't the perfect girl yet.
Gosh, that's not even a point we had to talk about on this episode, but I feel like we need to dive into that a little more, because that's so important to be the person your future spouse is going to be looking for. Yeah. If you're not that person already, gosh, I was not that person a year ago whatsoever. I would hope 2 years ago Brendan would have looked at me and been like, ooh, no.
Yeah, because you want the future person you're going to be in a relationship to have those standards. So if you're not even abiding by the standards that you're setting for him, then how can you give any credit to that guy? Because he obviously has no standards. Does that make sense?
Oh, I feel like it makes so much sense. And two, when you're healing, you need to just heal. When I was healing, I was being stupid. I was being such an idiot. I was going off doing Lord knows what. And do I regret a lot of those decisions? Yes, but I was in that healing amount of time. And for some way or another, that is the way that I needed to heal. And I needed to go through that season of life to now come to where I am now. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for all the things that I learned through that healing journey. And I would not genuinely change it for the world.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Everyone has their own path, and they're going to heal in whatever way that fits their lifestyle and fits them. And you just have to take the time. I think the biggest thing I hated when I got out of a relationship was, oh, it just takes time. Like, time's going to heal everything. I wanted to punch somebody in the face when they told me that.
Yeah.
But now that I've taken the time to heal, it's actually what works, unfortunately.
I did, however, hear a quote years ago. And when I went through my breakup, I thought of this over and over again. It was that time doesn't heal, but healing takes time.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Yeah, that's a much more eloquent way to say that. And it's so true.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I feel like our first piece of, not even advice, but like first pointer is kind of in line with what we're talking about, is making sure you are fully healed before you move on.
What does it look like when you're not healed and you start dating somebody?
I want to say it's a disaster, and I want to say it doesn't work. For me, I can fully say it was a disaster and it doesn't work when you move on before you're ready. And being on the reciprocating side of that, who has dated a guy who was not fully healed, that also was a disaster as well. But I have had friends, which I want to give this disclaimer, I've had friends not be fully healed from their past relationship, meet a great guy, move on, and they're completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so much work to do it that way. They have to now not just go to battle and heal on their own. They now have to bring someone else into the equation. And I honestly would say it probably takes double, if not triple, the time to heal that way.
Yeah. And I think if in your past relationship, if communication was a problem, that has to be fixed no matter what, because if you're bringing yourself that's not healed into a new relationship and you're not good at communicating that, I personally don't know how that would work.
I don't either. I think one of the biggest detriments of getting into a relationship before you're healed is that you bring all of that old insecurity with you. And you're holding this guy to a standard that it's not fair to hold him to.
Yeah. And I would compare, like, on my personal experience, I would basically treat my new boyfriend as if he was doing the things that my old boyfriend would do to me, even though he didn't. Mm-hmm. So I would be super jealous for no reason. He gave me no reason not to trust him, but I had no trust in him. And so you almost take all those characteristics that was like either hurting you or the toxic traits, and you just portray it onto the new guy, and that's unfair to him.
Mm-hmm. And the standpoint of time too, when you don't leave this big gap of time in between, it just blends together.
It does.
Like,
have you ever, like, you're telling them stories or things and you're like, wait, have I said that already? And you actually just said that to the last guy. Like, I've had that happen when I go on dates. Like, if I go on a date this weekend and then the next weekend I go on a different date with a new guy, and I'm like, wait, have I said that? No, I just told the last guy that.
Right.
Embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing. And I feel like I've always told friends, like, oh, if a guy does that, like, get rid of him.
Right. Yeah, that's a red flag.
I've so been guilty
goes back
of it.
to, like, have the standards for yourself before you give the standards to the new guy, because if you're expecting him to act a certain way and you're not even acting a certain way, it's going to cause problems.
Okay, so what would you say is ways that girls could know? Because I feel like a lot of times you need to hear it from a friend, a big sister. That's what we try to be on this show. How you are actually ready to move on. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, well, an obvious one is you're not thinking about him every single day and reminiscing on the relationship and only thinking of the good things and not thinking of the bad things.
Right.
I think it's super easy because we're creatures of habit and we just want to, like, have our safe space again and be comfortable. And so it's easy to just be thinking of them all the time. But I think a really good indicator if you have moved on fully and you're ready to accept a new relationship into your life is if simply you're not obsessing over him.
Right. And I think that can be a little bit of give and take, because I hate saying this online, but I'll occasionally think about my ex, not in a negative or positive way, but just in a way of they were in my life for 5 years. There's parts of my life that I cannot erase. So definitely don't be too hard on yourself in terms of that, because you're not going to erase your life. You can't just put a white out. What's it called? White out?
Yeah.
You can't just put white out over their name and like every single story of your life. But I think if you are crazy, obsessive, I don't have that personality. I never have. I have friends who have the crazy obsessive personality where it's like 2 years and they're still talking about it. And I'm like, I don't know if this is really an issue or if you're just that way. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And like, to your point, I think you want to keep those memories in your life as well, because exactly they were a part of your life. And I think health, like, healing in a healthy way is not completely erasing them from your life. It's accepting the fact that you spent the time and they're in your life for a reason and for a season, and you're moving on from that and you're on to better things. I don't think it's like completely don't think about him ever again.
Right.
It's just in a healthy way. Know that that's how you spent your life. He was there to teach you something, and it's time for you to move on, and you feel comfortable in that.
What about for the girls who got out of a relationship in a like horrible way, like ended horribly, they broke your heart? What does that healing journey look like? Because it's a lot different than just I'm not thinking about them. It's the bitterness that ties into it. It's the hatred. It's the all men suck. It's that aspect too.
I think it's a lot to do with forgiveness. Like you have to fully be like, I forgive them, even if they never said I'm sorry.
Right.
Which is so hard. Like I've never had my ex say I'm sorry. Yeah. And I obviously played a role in that relationship too. Like I wasn't the best person. I'm not going to say I was a perfect girlfriend in this relationship and he treated me so badly. Like I've never had that personal experience, but I think you need to take what has happened to you and fully be able to forgive that.
I think right after you do that step, the next and probably like final thing, I know we're jumping around a little bit, would be to forgive yourself as well.
Yeah.
Because when you look back at a past relationship and you realize the standard you held back then, you're like, ooh, that's horrible. Like really, I let myself be treated like that. I know personally for me, I beat myself up that I let myself be treated like that and be held to that standard. And I held that person to the standard. And I obviously did a ton of bad things wrong in my past relationship too, but fully forgiving myself and being able to close that door of I forgive them, I forgive myself. I feel like that kind of closes the door, ties in a nice little bow, and kind of lets you leave it in the past.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I remember after my first relationship, like my high school relationship, we had broken up before we got engaged, but this is the same one I'm talking about. I was like screaming in my car at myself saying like, how could you let yourself be so invested in one person? How could you lose your independence? Like you're so dumb, just so like so much negative talk towards myself. And that was not healthy for me either. So detrimental, which is a whole other subject, is like how you talk to yourself.
Yeah, entirely. I think there's two different sides to this question of how to know if you're ready for a relationship. There's the side where it's, have you moved on and have you closed the door from the past, got that healing from the past relationship? But there's also this other boat of girls who maybe have never been in a relationship before. But I would argue that some of those girls are also not ready for a relationship.
True. Very true.
How would you define for those girls who don't have any healing to go through? Maybe they did get out of a relationship, but things ended fine. They really didn't care, got out of it. How would you answer the question to those girls? How do you know if you're ready for a relationship?
I think a really good thing to do, and we've talked about this, you have a really good analogy, is kind of writing out your dream future guy. And not just like, oh, I hope he has blue eyes and brown hair. I'm talking like characteristic traits, like how he lives his daily life, what his morals are, what he believes in, what does he want in a future family. Write that out and then compare that to how you're living right now. Because if those two don't match, then it's not going to work. Would you say that's valid?
Yeah, no, I would totally say that's valid. I think, again, holding yourself to the same standard you're keeping them is such an important topic.
Yeah. Can you explain, because I know we've talked about this before, I think you call it the cupcake.
The cupcake. I've talked about the cupcake on like 5 different podcast episodes, I swear. But the cupcake analogy is literally like foolproof entirely. All of my friends who are engaged, dating, probably the men they're going to marry, wrote out this cupcake and then they found their cupcake. Have I made you write a cupcake before?
You have not.
I need to make it. We might be doing this after this episode.
I might have some homework to do.
Everyone, either you have homework or if you have a pen and paper accessible, pull it out. Let's sit down and chat. So the cupcake is essentially an analogy that some friends came up with years ago where you are essentially baking a cupcake. We make these lists of the perfect dream man, and a lot of times we're putting the finance bro, 6'5", blue eyes at the top of our list, and that's just not attainable. Like when you look at what the Lord has for you and like what the Lord promises you, it's not a guy who's 6'5" with blue eyes. It's a guy who has really good character. So the object of the cupcake is essentially you make your batter, and your batter is full of character traits. So these are who he is at his core, and vice versa. This can also work for girls or for guys to make of girls. Character traits. So these are things like his humility. He's kind. These are your non-negotiables. The things, if he doesn't have one of these, he's off the list entirely. That is so good to have. You're not putting his eye color. You're not putting his height. You're not putting his hair color. Those things at the end of the day, when we are talking about having a relationship that's glorifying to the Lord, those don't matter. Every single physical trait is going to fade. At the end of the day, we get older, your physical traits are also going to fade. When people sit around being like, oh, I need a guy who looks like this or talks like this or any of those things, how about his character? Those are the things that are actually going to last and the things that are going to make your marriage survive in the future. So write out your batter, your non-negotiables. Next thing, because this is not me saying that the character traits and the hobbies and things like that aren't important. They're the things that initially attract you to the guy. So you make the batter, you put it in the oven, you give it time to like simmer, all the things. Simmer, bake. I guess it kind of simmers when it's first coming up. Then you add the icing after you let the batter cool, of course. You add the icing. The icing is their hobbies and things like that, things that they're interested in. So yes, if you want a finance bro, that is where it's going to go here. I can only say all this because I do have a finance bro of my own. I'm allowed to talk like this. Thank you very much. Those are, he likes to surf. He likes to do this. He likes to cook. They're important, but they're not as important as the batter. Last thing is the sprinkles. These are the least important thing on your cupcake, but they're still on the cupcake. They don't matter that much. It's not the batter of the cupcake, but they're important. This is where you can put. He's 6'5". He's got blue eyes. All of those things that sound a little, what's the word I'm looking for? These are all the things that probably sound a little shallow, but you're allowed to put them on there because they are just the sprinkles. However, if you were to put that in your batter, cut from the list. Mm-hmm. The last thing is just funny to me. I think one of us just like made this up. It's the cherry on top. The cherry on top is just the silly little extra thing where if he has this, screw everything else, you're going for him. Mine is he has a green card. I could always joke with friends. That. If he has a green card, I don't really care.
Who cares who he is?
Who cares how he treats me? He can get me citizenship in Europe.
That's all I need. I wonder what my cherry is.
The cherry on top is obviously a joke. Please do not take that seriously. I know so many girls might run with that. Don't do it. Please don't do it. But this analogy just kind of gives you a really good baseline of what to look for. I also have so many of my friends' cupcakes. I had them like on my fridge at one point in life. I have them now in a box under my bed and I have kept them years later.
That's good. Because then when they find a guy, you can pull out the cupcake and be like, Miss Girl, you said you wanted an honest man and he's already lying about his height. Like, excuse me.
And vice versa. I can also, when I'm out in the world, say Brennan has a friend. Oh my gosh, he's got this. He's like this. His character's this. Wait, he literally perfectly fits her cupcake.
You're matchmaking over here. That's
matchmaking.
Smart. All right, all my friends, I'm gonna make them do cupcakes.
Right, exactly.
My sister too.
It's a really good thing to do.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's really good, like tangible knowledge that you can take, and I hope all you girls do that listening, or guys that are listening.
I remember getting so mad when I would see people basically be like, oh, I wrote out my dream guy and like now I have him. He has brown hair and he has all these things. And I'm like, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You found your husband at 15.
I had a list that I made when I was like 14. I think my church youth group like made us do it. And on my list was everything aesthetic. It was blue eyes, tall. For some reason, he had to have like good hands. Like I was freaked out by like men with dirty fingernails at the time. I mean, that's kind of still am. Yeah. It's kind of valid. But I would like look. I remember being even in school and like looking at the boys' hands in my grade. I'm like, there's a little like scar. His knuckles are a little too big. Like what? But yeah, it was all like characteristics of what he looked like, and it had nothing to do with like who he was as a person. I think I had a few on there. Like I wanted him to like respect my family, respect my parents' rules, those kinds of things. But there was no like ranking of what mattered most. It was like, he has to have blue eyes. He has to, fill all these things that I thought in my head was like my dream guy.
My cupcake is the only reason Brendan got a second date.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember the day before we were at your house and we were having like a girls' dinner or something, and it was before you went on a date with him. I think you were planning it.
I didn't want to go. I did. I like challenged myself that I would go on a date that week. I was home for a week in between so many travels. My like beginning of the year is so busy, and he prayed over our meal, and I've never once had a guy do that. And I put that on my cupcake the first time I made a cupcake, and I erased it the second 2 times I made it, because I was like, this is like so unattainable. No guy's ever going to say that. I was like sort of interested first date, but I was like, I don't really want to date right now. I'm loving my life. I'm traveling. And then he's like, can I pray for us? And I literally go,
come on.
You've got to be kidding me. And I was like,
I love
fine.
that gives me goosebumps. Like, it is so true. Like, what you set an intention on, and like what you tell the Lord that like you want out of somebody, like he's going to provide. And not promising he's gonna like give you the, you know, perfect toenails, but
and this is totally not in line with the standpoint of this episode whatsoever, but little by little I would just sit and look at the list. I asked my mom, because I've been through so much hurt past in relationships, and I would tell her, like, how do I know he's actually a good guy? And she was like, you made that cupcake for a reason. I did not actually decide that I liked him until a month in. I sat and I looked at my cupcake every single day. We were in the beginning stages of dating, and I would just check off every single time I saw a character trait that was on my cupcake. And it wasn't until I checked off every single thing that I was like, okay, I really like this man.
That's a whole nother episode we can do, is like the like lust versus actually liking them, and like, are you gonna feel butterflies and sparks?
Probably not.
Probably not. Like, I'm someone that feeds off of that, like feeds off of emotions, and it's like, oh, I love him or hate him like as soon as I see the guy. And that's something like I personally have to work on, because a lot of the times that's not how it works.
Yeah, not at all. And I've had that happen before, where I meet a guy and the sparks are instant. They were not with Brendan, and they just continue to grow more and more as our relationship goes on. And sustainability wise, I'd way rather have that.
100%, because when you're 20 years and married, I'm sure there's some days where you don't have those butterflies, and you have to choose to love the person.
Yeah. You love them, you don't like them at that given moment.
Yeah. So true. That was so good.
Switching back gears, however, to the girls who maybe have not been in relationships before, I really want to touch on the girlhood aspect of being single, because in the 2 years of my singleness, I learned so much from my female friendships than I did any guy I dated in the past. And I feel like being truly 100% good in my singleness, I loved singleness, was really how I knew I was ready for a relationship, because I honestly didn't want it.
Yeah, I hear that so many times when somebody finds like the one, they were never looking.
And I kind of hate that being said, because I always was looking, quote unquote. And so many people will say like, oh, I wasn't looking, but I still grieve my singleness because I loved it so much. I'll make comments now. I'm like, oh, I traveled abroad. Like, I could just randomly pick up and move abroad, and now I can't because I have a stupid boyfriend.
Tied down.
Love you, babe. Sorry. But it is such an aspect of when you're really evaluating your life. Are you 9 days out of 10? I'm not going to say 10 days out of 10, but are you 9 days out of 10, 100% content in your singleness? If the answer is no, you've got more work to do.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Because I think when you are not fully content in your singleness, it is a little bit of a spiritual issue, if we're being completely honest. It's you putting your future marriage, your future spouse, your future boyfriend above the Lord.
Yeah, you're holding that as like the number one, and that's the standard, versus the relationship you have with the Lord and yourself, and your comfortability of being alone and being with God alone.
Right. And I think that's why so many times people do say that, oh, they found the one when they weren't looking, because it wasn't a spiritual issue anymore. It wasn't a faith issue. They had all that they needed. They were full in life. When you are incomplete and you try to fill this void with another person, they're human.
Yeah.
They're going to let you down.
They're never going to fill the hole.
No, they're never going to fill the hole in that way. You have this God-sized hole in your heart that is not going to be filled from Chad.
Chad ain't going to do it. No, that's so true. Like, until you are fully content and actually joyful in your own life, not happy, because I think there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Truly joyful and content. Yeah. Basically, like, if you're have that satisfaction with yourself, and you know that you were okay being single, and now you thought the perfect man, if he was the perfect man, he just broke your heart, you're okay going back to singleness.
I think all these things are really important for singleness, honestly, to be content in your singleness, but it's also so important once you get into a relationship, because it makes a relationship so easy. So easy. You both are two complete people walking in, and you just get to have this joy-filled life together.
Yeah. And you get to like experience yourself and then like bring that person into your own experiences instead of like relying on him to bring you his experiences.
Right.
It's like you both can bring something to the table and you both can share your own individuality and kind of become one if you guys get there type of thing. But it's fun to like have that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say the last most important thing, because we are touching so heavily on community and having that community, we can sit here and lecture you guys all we want of. This is how you know if you're ready for a relationship. We're just two girls in our 20s. You know who's actually going to know? Those people in your life. Talk with them, get advice from them, because at the end of the day, they will be able to tell you if you're ready for a relationship or not.
Mm-hmm.
I've had friends call me out before being like, you are not even closely. Like, you have made such an idol out of a marriage and out of motherhood. You are not ready for this. But once they saw that I was completely content in my life, again, 9 days out of 10, but they saw that, they were like, oh, you're so ready to step into loving someone. Because before I thought I had the capacity to love someone, but I did not at all, because I had such a capacity filled in my heart for the idolization of loving someone. And that filled my heart more than the like actual feeling and action of love.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Good. Yeah, 100%. I think also too, like if you're listening and you're in a relationship and you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't make a cupcake, or like I don't have all these things on my list, and you're like kind of freaking out right now, because I definitely have been in those scenarios where I'm like dating someone, I'm like, wait, it's that, take that as like, or take this conversation as like a starting point, but don't jump to conclusions. Like don't go break up with your boyfriend tomorrow or tonight. Definitely like think about it, really analyze like that person and yourself at the same time, like we talked about, and just take it slow. And like Mackenzie said, like talk to the people in your life around you. They know you best and you know yourself best.
Right, absolutely. And to that point, we're not always our best selves. 1,000,000% of the time.
100%.
So if you're in a relationship with someone for 5 years, I'm sure 10 years down the line, I'm going to be in marriage and be like, I'm not happy with who I am right now. I'm not happy with the person you are right now. But like, it's situational. And sometimes we go through different stages of life. There's been points where I'm grieving something and I'm not a great person. So definitely like this is situational entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole basis of this podcast is we're constantly evolving and we're constantly learning. And so I fully don't want anyone to look at my life and be like, well, you said on the podcast, like you should do this, this, and this. And I'm over here doing something. Like we're all evolving. We're all learning. And I never want to be in a place in my life like I am fully content and I fully have made it. I'm fully acting the way I should in a relationship and fully learned all like the health things and doing everything 100% and 100% accurate. I want to constantly be growing. So I think just analyze your life and have the knowledge of it and just take it from there.
Yeah. I loved today's episode. Like I said, I wish I had this episode so many years ago, because I think this is such an important question to ask yourself before you actually get into a relationship, and really before you even date. Because again, say you meet that dream person and you yourself are not ready for a relationship, it could end so poorly.
Well, I hope you guys took something from today. And if you're listening, please leave us a review, follow, subscribe, do all the things that really helps us as we're trying to grow this podcast and make more educational and fun topics for you guys. But thanks again for listening, and let's chat soon.
We love you. Bye.